Are we
Good.
going to do this on video or audio? Just making sure so I can set up.
We're doing it on video as well.
Oh, video as well. Okay, just give me a quick minute.
Okay.
Then
All
I'll
right.
dial in from my laptop, so it's better. Yeah, just give me one quick minute, okay?
Yeah, sure. Take your time.
I found out on my way.
Okay, we're waiting for Beerud to get his video going, Mr. Engineer. Welcome, Dave.
Hello.
How are you?
Not too bad. I had forgotten who the guest was. I saw you had one and I didn't realize it was this one.
Yeah. So,
I assume I'm not showing video at the moment?
no, we just see your name.
Okay.
And we're waiting for Beerud to reconfigure his connection to show his video.
Good. There's an awful lot going on in the AI stuff he's involved. I don't know what we want to get into.
He moved away.
All right.
Okay.
So they say. I found out on my way to Harlem. Ellington, you don't live around here. He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born.
Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources to help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed. I'm here with my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. He's the CEO of Gupshup, the world's largest developer of chat boxes and AI smart messaging, where they're using their expertise to help digitally shift gender and racial bias. I am pleased to welcome Beerud Sheth to Community and Technology. Welcome, Beerud.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks for having me.
Yes, for sure. So, Beerud, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to where you are, and then tell us about what is Gupshup, which I understand means chit chat or hanging out. Is that the correct interpretation of that word?
That's right. Well, the word is Gupshup, and
Gupshup.
yes, it means literally chit chat in Hindi.
Okay.
And because we are a messaging and chat platform, we figured it was a very appropriate name, apart from the fact that a lot of English domain names are all taken, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
So, yeah, we just had to go deep into some other language to get it. But yeah, so just about my background very quickly. I originally grew up in India, came over to the US for graduate school at MIT. I've studied computer science, and then after a short stint on Wall Street, I've been a serial tech entrepreneur. I previously founded a company called Upwork, which pioneered sort of the gig economy and online freelancing. Upwork is presently a public company on NASDAQ, and it's sort of a remote. We were pioneering remote work 20 years ago, right? And now over the last few months, the whole world is adopting it. But we did that a long time ago. And then Gupshup is the second company I founded. It is a platform for messaging and chatbot development, right? Basically, this is how businesses can engage in conversations with their customers. And so whether it's sending one-way notifications or providing customer support, providing commerce and transaction and conversational marketing, these are some of the new trends that we'll talk about. But yeah, I think, with the rise of smartphones and mobiles, everybody loves to do messaging. I mean, you look at millennials these days, that's the only way they respond, right? They don't pick up calls, but they respond to messaging, which means not just parents, but even businesses have to have a messaging channel available to communicate with their customers. And that's what we enable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we've had previous guests on this show where we've talked in some detail about the bias built into AI or artificial intelligence. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing. Some of the stuff I read about your background is that you're working to help eliminate racial and gender bias in AI. How does that work, and what are you guys doing?
Well, so like I explained earlier, we provide a platform for messaging and chatbots for businesses. Now, to take advantage of that, businesses have to create these. Businesses have millions of customers. So when they get lots of messages coming in, they can't handle it personally. They can't send it to a customer support desk because you would need, lots and lots of customer support agents. Mm-hmm. So instead, what is turning out to be very useful is they're creating these AI software programs that are called chatbots, right? That can have an automated conversation with users, right? So once you build these chatbots, when a user asks a question saying, what items do you have, or do you have this in blue, green, or red? Do you have it in small, medium, large? The chatbot can provide all those examples. Or if somebody says my stuff is broken, or it's not working, or I want to upgrade or cancel, all of that can be handled in an automatic way using a chatbot. Now, these chatbots are really just AI software programs, right? Which means they use AI. AI is built into it to handle these responses, and that's where oftentimes bias can creep in, right? So because when you're answering questions, there's a lot of unconscious bias in human language already, right? So before I talk about how we try to address for it, I mean, just to explain where bias creeps in, right? It's not really a conscious thing, but the way AI programs are developed is you train it on examples of past documents, right? So you oftentimes you just take all the documents on the internet, you take all of literature, all posts, blog posts, and things like that, and you train AI software on the words that are published out there, because you need a lot of training examples to learn from, right? The AI needs a lot of examples. And then, as we know, in human language itself, in human literature and online content, there is inherent bias, because it's the bias of the author in those documents. And at least generally, the theory is that a lot of, when you have lots of biases, they may all cancel out, but sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's where any unconscious bias, or if some documents are historical, then obviously, even as the society is changing today, there may be some historical bias embedded in the documents. So to explain to give you a mathematical example, right? So for example, the word secretary oftentimes would be highly correlated with the female gender rather than male, if you just look at it statistically, right? Or there can be racial stereotypes also embedded in language, where sometimes violence may be tied more closely to one race or the other. And this is just simply a mathematical consequence of looking at documents. So I think the AI research community has realized that that's a good start. I mean, that's a good way to learn the English language for AI software, but that's not enough. You can't stop there. You need to sort of debug it. You need to eliminate certain biases. You need to remove certain things that automatically, in a way, AI is inheriting human thought and historical human thought, and we are like, and AI researchers now say that okay, it's good, but you don't want to inherit everything. In fact, there are some things that you want to explicitly eliminate, right? So that's sort of the problem, and it's not. And just to remind the scale of this thing, right? I mean, there are billions of documents, and there are billions of instances of these, right? So you kind of have to look at it mathematically. It's hard to. It's not like any one person can go in and remove one word or one concept and things like that. So you need, it's a statistical problem that needs sort of a statistical and algorithmic solution as well. So anyway, um, so to remove biases, I mean, what you do in AI software is, for example, you create alternative documents. You create additional, maybe synthetic documents, for example, right, which can counter the other kinds of biases, right? That, like, if you think about it, the reason why it thinks a secretary is likely to be female is because there's lots of documents where that sort of context is maintained. But if you just take, for example, you can take 1 million documents and just through software replace every instance of woman with man, and now you have a balancing set of documents which says, okay, it shows up equally, equally often as a man or woman, or a nurse, for example, right? Or there are these words that have acquired a lot of sort of loaded context, and so you can create synthetic documents to offset some of those things. Or you take certain words and you say, if you just take the word man and woman, right, in mathematical space, you say whatever the relationship is between man and woman should be the same between king and queen, right? So you sort of you remove the bias, because oftentimes king's roles might be different from queen's roles and so on. So again, these are just some mathematical ways to remove these things. So one is the AI community at large is already doing this. There's a lot of consciousness around it. And what happens is companies like us, we use what state-of-the-art research is being developed in universities and so on, right? So you don't start from scratch. You start from, you pick up what the broader community is researching. And then on top of it, additionally, what we will do is we'll train it with, like I said, different examples with different users, and we'll try to eliminate it consciously. Another example is just even the branding of the chatbot. Oftentimes, if it's a customer help agent, people will just, oftentimes even developers or product managers will name it with a female voice. And, again, that just automatically leads to bias as well. So I think there are many different ways to address it. It depends somewhat on the context. And,
I'm not sure where that's coming from. Go ahead, Beerud.
yeah, so there is sometimes the bias may be context dependent, meaning depending on which business you're in, what industry you're in, or what the what sort of service is being provided by the chatbot. So each business has to be careful. Firstly, be aware that there can be bias inherited through these AI software programs, and then secondly, eliminating that consciously in the AI software.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're talking about the language and the patterns that are built into language and teaching AI new algorithms and new patterns. Is that what's referred to as the pre-trained language? I read about that. What is pre-trained language?
Yeah, so what happens is, when you start with AI software, right, the AI software is what's called a neural network that mimics the human brain, right? So imagine if it's like when a child is born, right? It knows very little, right? So you have a neural network which has no knowledge whatsoever, but that network is very good at detecting patterns from anything it sees. So what we do is you take the AI software and you pre-train it, meaning you give it millions, actually billions of examples of human text, right? Natural language text. And the way to get billions of documents is, you just look online, you look at literature, you look at books, and you treat it, right? And what the neural network because I mean, all of this is happening at super fast speed on computers and so on. But what it's really doing is it says, okay, it finds relationships between words, right? And say this word occurs frequently with that word, right? Umbrella and rain occur frequently, or kick and ball occur frequently. So it detects these statistical patterns across across any millions of combinations of words and even sentences. And that's how it's learning the basic English language, right? That's the first step. So that's the pre-training that any AI software goes through, right? Then once AI has learned basic language, now you need to get a little more specific. Like say, if you're in the hoteling business, right? Or if you're in the e-commerce business and so on, like what does the word account mean? I want to open an account, I want to buy that, right? I mean, these words have very contextual meaning in different industries. What it means for a hotel is different from a restaurant versus, from a shop, and so on. So then you have to specially train it for that domain, right? I mean, most businesses are trying to do something very specific related to their business. Now, of course, some companies may be trying to solve all of English language. I think that's a much harder problem. It's easier to get high quality chatbots around specific domains. So anyway, so step one is pre-training the AI model on the general English language. And then step two is sort of fine-tuning it for your particular domain. And in that pre-training phase is when a lot of bias flows in. And then that can be, when you're fine-tuning it, of course, you need to be careful and take it out.
Okay. You're listening to Community and Technology on a WHCR 90.3. We're speaking with Beerud Sheth, who's the CEO of Gupshup. That's it right there, Tom?
Yes, Gupshup.
Gupshup, which is involved in chatbots and AI intelligence. And Dave, you want to come in and ask some questions or a dialogue with Beerud?
There's a lot of interesting questions that come up in this stuff. And I've been seeing claims. I haven't looked at your stuff in depth, but from some of your competitors.
Dave, you're breaking up. Your audio's breaking up.
Is this better? Am I clear now?
No.
Okay. Your competitors are making remarkable claims for what their intelligence is able to do by going beyond the language.
Sorry, Dave, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Dave, we can't understand you. Your audio is terrible.
Is this better now? Can you hear me now?
You're distorted.
Let me call back in and take the show for a little bit.
Okay, so let's carry on. What are the things that we talk about a lot? You talk about the built-in bias of some of the developers of a lot of the AI platforms, and of course we know that white males tend to predominate the industry. You're a person of color, and perhaps that helps inform some of your approach to this business. Tell us a little bit about how you're able to overcome the racial stereotypes that are built into language, which are very subtle. You're talking about pre-training and teaching the AI platform new language, but the very language of English has some very subtle built-in racial bias. So how are you dealing with that?
No, that's absolutely true, right? So I think, historically, for example, if we look at CEO names, right, they're more likely to be Smith and Johnson than a Hakeem or a Sunil, for example, right? And so on. So there are patterns like that. Or if you look at, incidences or names of leaders versus other people and so on. So I think there is, if you merely accept statistical patterns, then there is a lot of inherent unconscious bias or inadvertent bias even, right, in human language. And I think therefore, just sort of mixing it up, right? So now the good thing is, unlike humans, right? I mean, humans are not software programs that you can debug. You can't peek into somebody's mind and say, okay, I want you to drop this, this unconscious bias in your head, remove that, and insert some new ideas into that. It's a lot harder to do it with humans, but it's certainly possible to do it with software, because you can test it, you can train it, you can give it different kinds of examples and see how it reacts, and then say, okay, no, this is not good. So you can then give negative examples that, or so in some cases you want to remove some content, right? In some cases you want to create some additional training material that may be synthetic, right? You can give it the CEO names that are different, or you can just change every CEO name in the document before it goes into the training, so that it doesn't get some of these biases and so on, right? Or incidences of violences, right? Or systemic racism. Even if you look at the history of laws, I mean, they've consistently been racist and so on. So I think, sometimes the challenge is that you do find mathematical solutions, meaning even when you know it intuitively as a human, I think you have to translate it into a mathematical solution, which can be a little challenging. But I think, what helps is just once the researchers themselves are diverse, you have, so in fact, there are a lot of AI programs, and in fact, the AI community is very conscious of educating diverse people, right, about women and sort of Hispanics and African Americans and Asians and so on, along, just encouraging them, make it accessible, not be intimidated by technology, get comfortable with it, and then as you have a diversity of researchers, you have different mathematical approaches coming in, and so on. So I think all those things go to sort of addressing the problem.
Now, your company is based in Silicon Valley, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We have an office in Silicon Valley as well as in Mumbai, India.
And I presume you have a fairly diverse workforce, and clearly your leadership is not from this culture, from what I'm talking about, this culture, the white male European culture. Tell us a little bit about how you've developed your workforce and meet these requirements, these demands that you're talking about for diversity. How's that work?
Yeah, I think Silicon Valley does have some kind of diversity. I mean, you certainly see a lot of Indians and Asians. I'm just talking very broadly. I think the African American and Hispanic representation is still below national averages, I think. Really, I think the industry as a whole is, I know like startups that are, so oftentimes companies will say there isn't a good enough pipeline of qualified people, right? So it's not like somebody's trying to be restrictive, but you do need talented people. So I'm aware of startups that are now, creating a pipeline or making it more accessible and available, so that no longer, it's no longer hard to find somebody wherever they exist and so on. So whether it's from board memberships to leadership roles to even sort of entry-level positions, where actually is the hardest, because you need lots and lots of people at the entry level and so on. So I think it really is just a constant effort. At least with our company, I mean, because we have an international presence as well, there's we don't have the sort of the group think that you might have if you just had it in one location, right? But yeah, I think there is still, and I think just broadly with Hispanic and African American communities, I think just really it'd be good to encourage high school students in particular to say, look, technology is a very very powerful way. Of course, it's great careers and so on, but it also has huge impact on society at large. And I think, we need to encourage that across the board. I think over the last few months there was a great sort of racial awakening. I can see that the awareness I've been in many CEO meetings and so on. And a lot of people sort of opened their eyes in the sense that, even if you were not consciously doing that, it was just a bit of a blind spot, right? Because you don't realize how much of a problem there is. And I do know for a fact that, a lot of the fact that people are talking about it, asking about how to address it, getting help from others, getting invited speakers. Even schools around here are having sort of anti-racism curriculum, right? So there's just, it's in the air. You can feel it, certainly in Silicon Valley, maybe, but perhaps all over the country as well. So I think all of these are sort of, small incremental steps in the right direction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have Dave Burstein back. Dave, how are you sounding there, Dave?
Am I coming across?
Yes, much better.
Yes, much better.
Okay. Sorry about that before. I was going to ask you about tying in the AI you're using with other sources of information, which a lot of your competitors are saying that they can pick up the company's customer records or publicly available other data or location data and so on and combine it. But let's stick with what you've just been talking about, which is what do you do to reduce discrimination? And obviously, talking to high school kids might have an effect in 10 years, but most of us don't feel like waiting 10 years. So first question is the easy one. What are the important things that, say, Mark Zuckerberg should do, given that 9 out of 10 of his top executives or more are of one style type race?
Yeah, I think, like I just mentioned earlier, right? See, I think it's a bit of a balance, because I think it's not like companies are consciously discriminating, but on the other hand, these are very real problems in society that have to be addressed through representation, through technology, and through other means. So like I said, right, there are startups or companies that are emerging. Think of it as recruiting or staffing companies that specialize in sort of underrepresented communities, right? Because I was saying some companies say, look, sometimes it's hard to even find qualified people that can play these senior roles or can take on these roles.
Why don't they put excuse me there, because that's something that's really surprising me. Because I sure as heck know there are plenty of qualified people. And if the HR people can't find them, why don't they just fire the HR people and get somebody competent?
No, so, no, right, fair enough. So I think, look, what I'm saying is, Silicon Valley is just lots and lots of little companies, right? The smaller company, I mean, of course, the big companies get more visibility, right? Facebook, Google, Apple, and so on. But a lot of the recruiting, a lot of the activity happens in smaller companies, and smaller companies just inherently are not as organized. Often they don't even have an HR function. Often, they're very entrepreneurial, they're very nimble, they're very aggressive, right? There's lots of advantages to it. But on the other hand, the culture is just being developed, right? The organization is being developed, right? So I think to have real impact where it matters, and usually these companies then, within a matter of few short years can explode into giant companies, right? So the problem is a little more tricky, right? It's not organized. And then when one company is trying to hire, they need to hire some senior, a VP level role. At that instant, if they can, they ask around their networks, they look around a little bit, and whoever they find, they sort of take in. And usually, as you know, most people know other people like themselves, which is why it kind of perpetuates, right? So I think fair, in some cases, it could be inherent incompetence or bias in HR, but in many cases, like I said,
I'm talking about big companies.
Sure.
Facebook and Google are very attractive employers. They certainly can find people, and there's certainly no shortage of people of color who are qualified at every level.
Right.
But they don't get the jobs. And then the second question is going to be, once you have people in the company, how do you make it work? But let's do one at a time.
Sure.
You're out there every day dealing with this stuff. You're seeing it among your friends and your acquaintances. You're seeing it among the people you went to school with.
Correct. So I think the first step is, many companies have consciously started publishing their racial diversity in the company, right? Gender and racial sort of representation, and by publishing that metric publicly, you're shining a spotlight on it, and they're even admitting that we're falling short and we want to do more, right? So that's one part of it. I think many companies now have a diversity and inclusion sort of executive who's sort of making that a conscious part. So you're no longer just relying purely on HR alone. You're creating somebody, a senior in the senior leadership team whose job is to make sure that there's diversity and inclusion initiatives sort of flowing through the company as well, right? So these are all, and a lot of these, like I said, there was a huge, a significant awakening over the last few months. Some of it was happening earlier as well, arguably a little slower, but I think it's increased sort of dramatically. I think what gives me a lot of cause for optimism is at the entry level and at the younger levels. I mean, a lot of the students coming in are just inherently, gender blind, racial blind, and so on, because they've grown up. I mean, it gives me hope that the next generation is much more active. So I'm more optimistic about that.
What about the school you went to? What about you went to MIT? I think we heard at the beginning.
Yes, that's right.
Graduate students at MIT. What kind of diversity do you have there beyond Asian?
Well, so what I'm saying is what it was in my time, and I was there, 25, 30 years ago versus what it's today. It's certainly improved a lot. But I'm saying even, but in general, across colleges and so on, it's certainly, it's certainly more than it used to be. And I think that continues to, but it's not just the number, it's representation is one part of it, but the other part of it is just attitudes and openness, right? And willingness to be inclusive, because it's not enough just to fill a target quota, if you will. It is important that everybody's included. It doesn't feel different or special. It's just normal part of doing business. So I don't know if I can explain away all the issues that happen. All I'm saying is that there is conscious effort and activity, and a lot of entrepreneurial initiatives, right? Like I said, startups that are, staffing companies that are focused exclusively on enabling sort of underrepresented communities and getting participation there, so that, when there is a will, the ability to execute very quickly and follow through happens just as fast.
Dave, before we follow up, Dave, let me just say that you're listening to Community and Technology with Stu Reed and Dave Burstein. And a very special guest today is Beerud Sheth, who's with Gupshup, AI and chatbots technology company. And we're talking about diversity in Silicon Valley and technology companies in particular. And Dave, I think you had a follow-up for Beerud.
Well, first, let me thank Beerud for sticking his neck out and coming out and talking about these things publicly, because most people above the technical level try to bury this kind of discussion. Stu, should I throw a question following up on how you make diversity work, or should we go back to what we're learning about AI, chatbots, and interactions there? Which is the right topic?
I'd like to talk more about the technology piece and the work that Beerud is doing. I read something about a bias, racial bias in automated speech detection systems. What is that about? Can you tell us about that and how that works and what you're doing to ameliorate?
Sure. Previously I talked about sort of text and natural language, but AI is being used in lots of different domains, right? So certainly speech recognition is one area. And while we're talking about it, I'll also add image recognition, right? Recognizing faces and so on. Mm-hmm. And again, in there are known, very well-known limitations of AI that's currently trained using standard samples, right? There are just many more, for example, white male faces than, let's say, black and female faces as examples online, right? So when they're being trained, the accuracy rate in in one area is much higher than in the other, for example. So I think that, or even when it comes to speech recognition, right? The word patterns, the pronunciations, the dialects, right? Just sort of little differences. So I mean, we all use a Google Assistant or Alexa, right? And they can recognize certain speech a lot more accurately than other kinds of speakers, and so on, because again, like I said, right, they just train it on samples. So if you look at, I don't know, TV anchors and speech, right, because that's easy to get recorded voices, again, because of the historical biases, they tend to be more of one kind than the other. So these are all examples of like that. And then when you and where it has a real impact, even in sort of AI is being used, for example, in judicial programs where to predict, how likely is a person likely to commit another crime in the future. And I think you have to be very careful, and that can lead to sentencing guidelines and so on, or sentencing recommendations for judges and so on, right? And I think things like that have the potential of having, of perpetuating the biases that have been endemic throughout history.
What kind of data do we have about that so far? We have it set? What kind of data do we have about things like sentencing guidelines and whether they're unbiased or whether they're biased?
Well,
do we actually have the companies giving us the data by which we can figure that out?
Yeah, in fact,
this we're all just speculating about?
No. So there is, I've certainly seen research where somebody actually went back through, so they looked at federal appeals courts and higher, right, the federal court system, and they looked at all kinds of judgments rendered by different kinds of judges in different kinds of situations. And they did find, that there are a lot of inherent biases and very interesting things, right? So you can compare male judges versus female judges, or, sort of white judges versus black judges. And then they even found, for example, judges with daughters, had better averages on gender issues than judges without daughters, for example, and so on, right? And it just sort of, it in some cases it ties with intuition, right? Which is, that when people can relate to other people more viscerally, you tend to see less bias. But when you do this othering, right, you don't relate to the other side, that's when a lot of bias creeps in. So there is, there's a lot of research ongoing, and the good thing is actually AI shines a very stark mirror on society, because when you look at AI, and with AI, you can do a lot of testing in a way that you can't do with humans. But you train AI, and then you say, okay, here are some 100,000 sample cases. How would you judge or rule on each of these instances? And then you can look at averages and so on. It's hard to do these sort of experiments with real human beings. So I think actually AI is going to help. AI research is going to help us look at ourselves or our society in a different way and see how some of these decisions are being made, and so on. So I think, I think it looks promising. It's still a lot of work to be done, but it's sort of moving in the right direction.
Let me take you back to the kind of work you do, where you're interacting with customers on behalf of companies. I don't know the particulars on you, but I'm hearing from people in the field, some of your competitors, that they're getting very good results by adding much more than the interactions and the words that they have there. They want to tie it into the customer's experience at the company, whether the company rates this as a desirable customer or not. Other folks are turning it into location data. Some folks are, of course, pulling it to the data that's readily available from information brokers, from credit ratings to what kind of school you went to, what magazines you read. How effective is that kind of work, those kinds of other indicators when you're trying to figure out the right response to a customer in a chatbot?
I think so at least in most examples that we've seen, I mean, it's not like users are, it's not like AI is leveraging external third-party data to make, I think, see, most AI chatbots are working within a certain context, right? A customer comes to the chatbot and says, or to that help window, and says, I have this problem, let's say my laptop is broken, and then you can go through some troubleshooting steps and figure it out. And maybe they get an upgrade offer, or they get, a solution to the problem that they can then buy and pay for it and, get the whole thing done. Or, right. So usually it just stays within the context of that conversation. Also, these messaging and chatbot experiences are inherently one-on-one experiences. They're private conversations, right? They're not, it's not a publicly broadcast ad, which means you can offer special or individualized offers that are appropriate to that person, given the context of the conversation. So, a lot of these third-party research, I mean, they're useful for statistical analysis, but they don't often help in a one-on-one conversation because I think you can sort of break the conversation thread if you bring in non-contextual stuff into the conversation. So it's less of an issue. I know in advertising and so on, usually the kind of ads that they target tend to be based on other behavior patterns and habits that they see. But when you're dealing with each person as an individual, that's less of an issue.
Well, let me throw a couple of examples that are based on things that I know are happening. Mm-hmm. And tell me how this tools you're using, not necessarily your own service, could do something about it. For example, T-Mobile has much stronger coverage in some parts of the country than others. So they're much more enthusiastic about signing customers up in New York than in Vermont, for example. Right. And that's what I do, right? I write about the internet phone companies and networks. So I know that raw piece is data. If T-Mobile, when they were getting inquiries through services like yours, said, we want to get New York customers, we're not interested in Vermont customers, could you help them out? What kind of data could you use for that? Can you get location? And what would the impact be?
Yeah, so I think, see, with mobile devices and mobile messaging, it's easier to capture location, albeit with user permission, right? So I mean, I would imagine a chatbot where it would the first thing you would ask is, please let me know your location so I can check the coverage.
Can't you do that pretty accurately by IP?
No, so that's the good thing with mobile devices. You're not depending on IP, you're depending on GPS, right? So if the user says share location, it is very, okay. Think about Uber and Lyft, right? I mean, they capture your location down to the street block. So it's very, very precise. And that's available on mobile smartphones. When you're using it on a laptop, you don't have, most laptops don't have GPS location, and therefore you have to infer it from IP address, and that's not very reliable. But when you're using a mobile device, you're almost always have GPS precise location that tells you exactly where you are. So down to the block, and then you can say, well, check so then T-Mobile could presumably check the coverage even before telling the customer saying, yes, we have a deal for you or not, right? And they could say, look, our coverage is only 20% in your area. Are you sure you want it? Versus, yeah, we got 100% coverage and you can get it, right? So it's
let me ask Stu, Stu a follow-up on this, because this is something that's come up here in New York. Stu, The insurance companies charge higher rates to people in Brooklyn, where there are a lot of Black and Latinos, than they charge to people in Staten Island or Westchester. Do you think that that kind of information could affect the interaction through a chat box, that insurance companies would take a look at this location data and use it to choose certain demographics? I don't want to put our guest on the point on this, which is why I'm asking you.
I know that happens, Dave, but I think that's really a question for Beerud in terms of how location data may be used to guide or direct the chat box conversation.
Yeah, look, I can't speak for what certain companies are doing or not. I mean, but what I will say is, if you're right? Because of the mobile device now, you can capture much more precise information. You know who the person is, that individual. You know where they are very precisely, and you know a lot more about the person while you're in this conversation, right? So, and that, of course, is a tool for both good and bad, right? Some businesses might use it to selectively discriminate, but others might use it to selectively offer special things. And what I would say is, ultimately, these can lead to great entrepreneurial opportunities, because if somebody says, you know what, there's no reason to charge a higher premium to these residents, and they can come in and offer a better price. I think that becomes an opportunity, right? So I think, see, I have a little more of an entrepreneurial bent of mind, which is, yes, there are some problems in society that have to be solved by legislation and regulation and so on, but there are many other problems that actually will get solved by entrepreneurs, right? Who are just going to say, this doesn't make sense, and I can just swoop in and offer a different product, right? So, and it may be somebody who can relate with that audience and say, this is an arbitrage opportunity, right? No need to charge this much, and build a profitable business around it. So I think this is where, I'd like to, just take a problem solving approach to it and say, look, these things get arbitraged away. These businesses will get, will lose customers if they don't operate in an efficient way and a fair way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no entrepreneurial opportunity without problems. That's for sure.
May I recommend you reach out to AT&T with that idea? AT&T. No. Let me keep going before you dismiss what I'm saying. AT&T, for the 20 years I've been reporting about them, has had the best programs I know of reaching out to the Latino, Spanish-speaking community and other communities that don't speak English, because they saw the opportunity there. They got a whole lot of customers.
Right.
And then I remember being surprised about 8 years ago, when it still might have been controversial. I was in downtown San Francisco. I saw this AT&T store on top of it. In fact, I think it was right on Market Street, that had a huge rainbow flag in front of it. Because AT&T actually went and found those niches, and a rainbow flag in San Francisco might very well attract some of the local people.
Right.
Let me throw you another example. Say you were working with Amazon, and you were trying to deal with customers who wanted to return something. Could you look at the Amazon record of that customer, see whether they had returned 1 in 50 or 1 in 100, or 1 in 5 items, and deal with them based on that? I happen to know Amazon does exactly that. And I have no trouble with returns, because I return about 1 in 100 things and they give them to me automatically. But they've also told Wall Street that they try to weed out the people who return too much. Could you work that kind of thing into your system?
Right. I mean,
company records.
Absolutely. I mean, if a company has historical data about the customer, right, which is specific to that individual, then of course they're going to use it to optimize their chatbot experience or their customer support experience. right? Because they know who they are talking to. And, arguably, I mean, this is something, I mean, irrespective of the gender or race or anything. I mean, this is just an algorithmic thing. Of course, there are some customers who are profitable, some customers who are not, and they would, try to make it attractive for the customers they want and less attractive for customers they don't. So I would not be surprised. And yeah, I mean, I would think that I'm sure this must be happening. But we know many businesses that say, I'm going to pick up the customers that the other companies don't want, right? And will go after them. Certainly in the insurance sector, right? There are companies that go after high risk drivers, while some strategy is going purely after low risk drivers. It could be around certain demographics, the language barrier, like the example you gave earlier with AT&T in Spanish. I mean, certainly if somebody caters to an audience in a language that they're familiar with, or using role models and brand ambassadors that they're familiar with. I mean, obviously, I think every business has to optimize for its strategy. I think what so there is some, targeting and segmentation that's inherent. I think what you don't want, I mean, every business has to do it, right? What you don't want is them segmenting or targeting based on race or gender in an unfair way, right? And I think we,
you mean like the insurance companies do, and the auto insurers in particular, and the medical insurers do?
Well, I hope it's
routinely?
not. Yeah. Well, I hope it's not.
The evidence is really overwhelming on that for many years.
Right.
How they redline. Let me throw you one other question about what you could do. Assuming you had access to somebody's medical records, could you differentiate your response to them based on those medical records that most insurance companies, of course, have on any of their clients? Could you integrate that into your system? Or could your competitors integrate that into their system? Let's be less particular.
Well, I mean, if an insurance company has the health records of a customer, see, I think what chatbots do is simply automating their manual processes, right? So if their manual process today has some of these things where I'm assuming a claims person, looks at the history and decides to approve or disapprove a claim, then they're going to take that manual process and try and automate it into a AI or chatbot process as well, right? So I don't know, I don't know if AI solves the problem of good versus bad. It's sort of a neutral tool.
No, but it sure as hell makes it easier to discriminate if that's what you want to do, because AI makes it easier to do almost anything more efficiently, at least for the kinds of problems it works on. No, am I wrong?
So yeah, so I think those are the things that we'll have to, it's easier to catch it too, right? Because with AI now, you can test and you can evaluate and you can demonstrably prove some of these things that are happening, because with human agents, sometimes they would just say, oh, it was just a human error with that one person. And it's harder to prove sort of systemic bias, but with software, it's easier to verify, it's easier to test, it's easier to prove. And by the way, it's easier for a competitor to come in and say, I'm going to scale up and target these customers that are unwanted by these, customers that were previously discriminated against. Could be a very valuable market segment that other companies can, swoop in and build a business around. So I think, it could make some problems worse. I'm not denying that, but I think it opens up a lot more opportunities for newer entrepreneurs and for newer businesses, as well as to detect and perhaps even monitor, what's happening in those instances.
We're just about out of time.
Can you come back to me when we have about 90 seconds?
Excuse me, Dave. We're just about out of time. I'm wondering if Beerud can maybe, to today's point, follow up. I read something about AI ethics programs. Could that play into some of the issues that Dave is raising? We just got about a minute or two left. If you can speak to that.
No, that's absolutely correct. I think oftentimes in engineering fields, people just focus on optimizing the mathematical and the algorithmic performance of whatever you're building. However, just being aware of the broader societal context, right, the broader issues that are at play, and how the intersection of technology and society, how the two play. I think there's a need in the tech and research community and the entrepreneurial community to be aware of it, to correct for it, to be transparent and open about it. And I think, if most people, most entrepreneurs, most researchers sort of adopt these things, it makes it harder for the ones, some of the sort of bad examples that you were giving, it makes it harder for the bad apples to hide, because you have to, if there's a new standard and you have to adhere to it. And if you don't, then people will know as well. So I think, I think this broader area of tech and AI ethics, there's certainly greater awareness in the tech research and entrepreneurial community. And I think with any technological progress, I'd like to think that there are more opportunities it creates than the problems that it might create. So I'm more optimistic than less. Yeah.
Okay. Any final comments, Dave? We just have about a minute left.
Less than a minute. Okay, very quickly. The thing we didn't get to, because we decided not to go more into how to increase diversity, is the culture inside the company. Any Black person who's ever been in a major company knows that they're going to face some obstacles they have to overcome. The interesting example came up in the New York Times, where they discovered that in the major companies like Google, there was caste discrimination. And the top management of Google didn't even notice this, apparently, that the engineers of higher caste, who were more likely to have education that got them to Google, treated the people of lower caste in the same company, or same division, often the same job, despicably. So there are lots of things that you have to do to make anti-discrimination work, and that applies to low-caste Indians and just about everybody else who's different from the people who are already running that company.
Right. Yeah, I think there was in Cisco, there is a case that's going on out there. And yeah, I mean, this surprised me as well. I mean, as an Indian, you're right. India has its own different kinds of discrimination that has perpetuated. And again, there you'll find in large cities, it's deeply integrated, but in sort of other areas, not so much. And when those people come here, it surprised a lot of me and my Indian friends as well. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. It's not just sort of the black and white racism issues in the US, but because the US is such a melting pot, you have other problems, maybe Israel-Palestine, maybe, caste system in India, or even other Asian issues and so on, they come in here. And I think ultimately, the thing I'm quite impressed by as I'm a first generation immigrant. I think America is certainly the most reflective society where at least it's trying to move in the right direction compared to, and I'm just comparing to other countries, right? So it's not by no means perfect, but at least there is a desire, a willingness, an aspiration, and some real progress. It's just a lot slower than we'd like. But I think, we all got to do our bit and keep pushing it, leave the world a better place than we found it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you
for joining us with this.
Yes, absolutely, Beerud. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing information about your company and AI and what you're doing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Hope to have you back again. Been listening to Community and Technology with Beerud Sheth and Gupshup, AI messaging and chatbots company. Thank you, Beerud.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tune in next week for more from Community and Technology. Stu and Dave signing off.
He moved away one day, so they say, from Harlem. I can hear his echo still. Now, you can't keep me away from where I was born. I was baptized by my daddy's horn.